just start. That is my usual advice for people who are thinking about starting, because you don't need to sit and ponder for weeks or months about whether or not you want to do it. The best thing is just do it and see if you like it, right? So let data guide you in your path. Because look, when you do it, either you'll absolutely love it, which is great, the answer is clear, or you'll hesitate and avoid doing that, and that itself is an answer too. So one way or the other, you'll find out what it is, and that's the best way to think about it.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Prateek, Joshi, and as close as I'm going to get to pronouncing it right. But Prateek grew up in a small town in the southern part of India, did high school there, and then for undergraduate got a degree in a degree in India, then came over to the U.S. and went to USC to get a master's degree and specialized in machine learning. Graduated and went to Silicon Valley and worked in AI for his first job, and then did a few different jobs. Wrote 13 books on various aspects of AI. Identified that AI doesn't translate into the real world as much, and so started his business to address the issue of how to apply AI into the real world. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks, Devin. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So, well, with that, I took a longer journey and condensed into the 30-second version, but let's unpack that a bit. So tell us how your journey got started growing up in the southern part of India.
Yeah. Growing up in Gulbarga, that's the name of the town, in the southern part of India, I was just kind of water was a bit of a luxury. Where I come from, it's not as easily available, and it was like a normal part of life. And so growing up, all of us, me, my friends, our families, very cognizant of water, and making sure we store it, we retrieve it at the right time, make sure we don't waste it. It's not like a tap that you can just turn on and water is there 24/7. So that's how I grew up. And so it's water holds a special place in my heart. And growing, and then after I grew up, started getting really interested in mathematics. That led to machine learning, and that's pretty much all I've done in my career. And
that jumps over all of that in your career, what we'll want to make sure we touch on in the podcast. So with that, so you started out, you got a undergraduate in India, and what did you study in undergraduate?
Yeah, in undergraduate, I majored in electronics and communication, and with a core focus on signal processing and obviously machine learning. But back then, when I was doing it, machine learning was not nearly as big as it is now. So I just kind of I saw glimpses of what this field could be, and got really interested. So that's how I kind of took a couple of courses, did a research internship, basically kind of got interested in the field, and I started exploring it more. And that was my first taste of machine learning. So in the initial days, worked on audio, images, basically anywhere where data was getting generated, and anything interesting we can do with the data using the tools available back then. I started doing that. So back then there weren't any pre-built libraries. AWS was still very, very new, so it wasn't really accessible.
And just to fill in a bit of the details, so did undergraduate, graduate, and you went to USC and got a master's degree. And what was it in machine learning, or what was the degree in?
Yeah, in my master's, I completely specialized in the area of machine learning. Basically, took the courses, anything related to machine learning, and yeah, that's how I came out of USC and got my first job at Nvidia.
So now, so you're coming out, and what did you do in video, or what was the job, or kind of how did you start out, and was it in AI, or how did you kind of break into the field?
Yeah, Nvidia was just starting out their machine learning group. So basically, they're building up a team to bring machine learning onto their mobile processors like Tegra, and they're building an amazing team. So I'd done an internship at Nvidia and really loved the team, loved the culture, and they asked me to join full time after I graduated, and that's how I got started. And most of my work was centered on bringing machine learning to mobile because machine learning is a very resource intensive, at least even now it's very resource intensive in terms of the compute you need. And so the goal was to make sure, how do we translate that to mobile so that we can put it on phones all over the world.
Now you say, okay, and I think that sounds, and it is, it used to be, and it's still to some degree, is supercomputers, a lot of processing power, depending on what you're doing. Sometimes you can also do it via AWS or the cloud, but certainly back then, and even to the extent today, you're going to still need quite a bit of processing power to do a lot of the AI and machine learning type of things. So now as you're working there, now I know that you mentioned you went through a few companies, but maybe give us an idea. So once you were with Nvidia, where was the next stop along your journey?
Yeah, my work at Nvidia and also a couple of companies after that, it was mostly on virtual infra, meaning data that I used to work on was images, text, time series data, anything that is like virtual, meaning you can't touch and feel it. And through that process, realized that machine learning AI as a field, it has become very ubiquitous in the virtual world. Like search engines, we use it every single day. We use Netflix, we use e-commerce, but all of that is inside our phones and computers. But when it comes to the physical world, meaning the facilities that make ketchup bottle, ketchup itself, ketchup or bottles or food products, AI was not even close. It wasn't even being used like the way we do in the virtual world. And that was the core motivation behind launching Pluto Shift, is to bring AI.
And we'll get to where you're at today,
world.
but what I don't want to do is make sure we don't jump past all of your journey
to
focus on today. So before we get to where you're at today, so first job was Nvidia. What was the next step along the journey?
Yeah, next step along the journey was working at two startups, basically back to back. They were back then they're just small startups, and they just worked on the application, and then they got acquired, and then that was about the moment. So I spent there about call it 4 years working on that before deciding on launching the company. So just spent 4 years implementing algorithms on mobile, cloud, basically different use cases like 3D modeling, and kind of bringing the applications to the mobile phone again. So that's how I spent those initial 5 to 6 years across these companies.
And what took you from Nvidia, which I think is a bigger company, or at least more established, to go into the startup route? In other words, was it, hey, I want to do something more exciting, or I always wanted to be in startup, or I got fired and they didn't want me anymore, any or all the above? But what kind of took you to that next step of entering into the startup realm and working for startups?
Yeah, I really got excited by how startups function. So I live in Silicon Valley, so just kind of everywhere around me, the culture of hustle, building fast, deploying, and kind of just fast iteration. I think that was very exciting. And obviously, Nvidia is a very big company, so it's a different culture. It's very fast paced, but when it comes to a startup, it's breakneck speed. So I got really interested in working at a startup, especially when super early. So that's how I got interested in exploring startups, and that's how I got into it. So yeah, definitely the big motivation behind that is just wanted to enter the startup world and embrace the culture.
That makes sense. And so now, as you've entered into the startup world, you worked for a couple different startups along your journey, and you're doing that for a period of time, and a couple of them got acquired, and so you're kind of going through those motions. So then, kind of what took you to the step of deciding maybe I'll go out and do my own thing, or I'm going to take my own journey, or I'm going to kind of take my own path? How did that get started?
When I was working on these products at previous companies, yeah, most of the companies, in fact, almost all of them, were working on virtual infra or virtual data, right? And what I wanted to do really was work on a product that can impact the physical infrastructure, physical space, and that was the big kind of breakthrough in kind of understanding what I wanted to do next. And also the other part is I really wanted to use my professional expertise, which is AI, and do something in water. Just completely own it, it wouldn't resonate with anybody else except me, because that's the story, that's my story, like growing up. And so back then it was a bit of a very random combo, like, where is AI and water, and what are you gonna do with it? And that was the moment when I had to kind of figure out, does it even make sense? And that's when I started talking to a lot of the people who operate water related infrastructure. And once I talked to them, realized it's a massive opportunity, because the kind of data they collect is huge. Like a lot of sensors, pressure, temperature, flow rates, a lot of constraints. Right? Water is precious. You can't just waste it. And once I talked to them, realized that this could be something that is my zen, meaning I can see myself working on this for a long time, and I would love to do something like this. And at the end of the day, you can build a business, you get to work in AI, and you get to do something good. If you reduce water consumption, reduce water wastage, reduce resource wastage in any sense, that was like my zen moment, and that's how I kind of decided to launch this. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. And so now, as you're saying, okay, decided to launch this, going to go in this area. Maybe this area makes sense for me, even if it doesn't always make sense for everybody else. And so now you get, you decide to take the leap. And is it one where you quit your job, jumped into this full time, started as a side hustle, or kind of how once you decided you wanted to go after it, how'd you get going?
Yeah, once I decided, I quickly talked to customers and built a quick prototype. And by that, I literally mean just building a tool on my laptop, like hosted on my laptop. So that was like the first version. And then after that, to set up a company, I started talking to investors. And after talking to a few, Unshackled Ventures was the one where they really understood what I wanted to build. And also at that time, I needed help with visa, because it was unclear how this would function. Meaning, on a work visa, if you're an employee, you apply to companies, like visa transfer, all of that is very straightforward. But if you want to launch a company, that's a very different story. And more than anything, didn't have the resources to hire an attorney and go through this, mostly because it was very unclear. So that's when Unshackled Ventures, that whole area of specialization, is obviously it's venture capital, but they specialize in visa related visa related problems and issues, basically helping people launch companies who are on visas. And yeah, so that was when I talked to them, and it made a ton of sense. So they agreed to invest, and I launched the company and got Unshackled Ventures on board, and then that's how we got started.
That definitely makes sense. And so now that's kind of the business and how it's got started. Kind of give us an idea, where is it at today as far as, kind of the business? Has it been one where it's taken off and everybody's now using AI and accepting it and understanding the applications? Is it one where it's still trying to find the market fit and, where the customers are and how to find them, and kind of, where is it at today, and where do you see things heading in the future?
Yeah, today we serve Fortune 500 companies. We are actively engaged in multi-year contracts with them. So it certainly took a couple of years to iterate and find the product that works. So yeah, so I would say the first 3.5 years was just iterating on product, because what happened was, if you build something, you have to make sure it's productized so that people use it at scale. And especially when it comes to data, there's a lot of variation involved, meaning it's not like a product where people can just sign up and use exactly as is, right? So when it comes to data related products, data platforms, you need to deal with a wide variety of data. And we're dealing with Fortune 500 companies. They have systems that are legacy systems, that are systems that have been installed many, many years ago, and there are so many people involved. So the goal is to figure out how to build a product that can work at scale. And so yeah, we iterated on that. But yeah, now we have some great customers, and we are figuring out how to build the business, how to scale it up, and even get more customers.
So, well, it sounds like definitely a fun journey and a good future yet to come. So, well, now as we've caught up to kind of the present day of your journey, even looking a bit into the future, I always have two questions I love to talk about at the end of each episode. So the first question is along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what did you learn from it?
My worst business decision has always been around people. Meaning, looking back, things like even before we had any customers, right? Hiring, say, a salesperson, even before you have anything, and kind of completely delegating that task so that you don't have to do it, right? So that's one example I could think of, where until you get your first 10 customers, you got to physically go and sell and learn what it is that you're selling, right? So that was definitely one. And another people related, actually, like part B of my answer would be around hiring. And basically kind of learning what to look for has been a key learning. I've made many mistakes along the way, and mostly because I didn't even know how to probe. Like, what am I even looking for? We're growing. We just need people. Oh yeah, if you're a person with a face and two hands who can type, great. Come on. So it's getting more sophisticated around hiring, and also kind of figuring out, how do I evaluate the soft skills, the cultural fit, things that are not as black and white as, oh, the person can write code, so come on board, right? So yeah, I would say people related decisions have been my mistakes, and also it's a very good learning process as well. So every time I recognize it, I fix it, but then there's a new mistake waiting to be made. So yeah.
Oh, and I think that there's a lot of, a lot of what you hit on is what you oftentimes face as a startup and small, anybody that's getting into business. And I think when you're always on the employee side and work for others, like, oh, I can tell when, what's a good employee and what's a bad employee. And, it's always easy to be kind of Monday morning quarterback, but when you're actually making decisions, one, to figure out when you hire and when you actually delegate and when you don't. And, sometimes you just want to say, oh, I don't want to deal with this, and I'll just hand it off to somebody else when it's really not the right time. But on the converse is also finding that right person. I think a lot of times when you're starting out, you're saying, hey, anybody that, anybody that I work is going to work as hard as I am, and they're going to be, have the same desires and drive, and they're going to be a great fit. sometimes you get lucky and they are, but other times, not everybody has the same motivations. Not everybody has the same desires. And so finding those people that have the skills, when is the right time to hire them, and making sure that they have that fit definitely is, I think, mistakes have to be made, and you have to learn along the way. Second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
Just start. That is my usual advice for people who are thinking about starting, because you don't need to sit and ponder for weeks or months about whether or not you want to do it. The best thing is just do it and see if you like it, right? So let data guide you in your path, because look, when you do it, either you'll absolutely love it, which is great, the answer is clear, or you'll hesitate and avoid doing that, and that itself is an answer too. So one way or the other, you'll find out what it is, and that's the best way to think about it. And the other thing that I often see is obsessing about or getting paralyzed about decision making. Let's say you do start, and then after that you realize, oh, should I build this or that? Should I talk to this customer or that customer? Should I price it like this or that? My answer is test it, experiment, right? A/B test it, and figure out. If you, one way or the other, it doesn't matter. If what your customers will tell you, that matters way more. So I would say rapid experimentation, or at least setting up a framework to do rapid experimentation in your life, career, everywhere. It just helps, and it gets you out of this decision paralysis mode that a lot of people people get stuck and they don't do anything one way or the other. They just sit there. So that's the advice I frequently end up giving.
No, I think that's definitely some great advice, and there are certainly great ones as you're starting out to be aware of. So, well, with that, as we wrap up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, or they just want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
You can find everything about me on prateekj.com. It has links on my LinkedIn, Twitter, how to reach out, how to contact me. And also I write a weekly newsletter, prateekjoshi.substack.com, on my thoughts on machine learning advice. And if you want to learn more about the company, go to pluroshift.com. More than anything, I'm happy to have a discussion. Feel free to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, contact you, find out more, and support a great business and great company. So with that, as we wrap up the podcast, thank you again, Prateek, for coming on the podcast. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome journeys. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Prateek, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin. It was a great conversation.